evening, everyone. I'm Tom Griffith.
And I'm Jean Mackin. For the fourth time this year, Vice President Joe Biden was on the ground in New Hampshire today, this time for an official campaign visit.
Mr. Biden echoed the administration's commitment to the economy and narrowed attacks on presumptive Republican challenger Mitt Romney. Our Josh McElveen is live in Keene, where the vice president addressed supporters. Josh?
Yeah, you know, he may be a frequent visitor to New Hampshire of late, but Vice President Biden drew a nice little crowd to Keene this afternoon, wrapping up what was kind of a whirlwind trip through the central and western parts of the state. Now, the crowd he addressed here was probably about 400 to 500 strong, and initially, the Vice President comments, his tone was very measured, particularly when he was talking about the accomplishments of the Obama administration. But then the Vice President, well, he turned downright fired up when he started talking about Mitt Romney and the Republican agenda.
The Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden.
After a nice welcome to Keene, Vice President Biden once again broke out the charts on job growth, highlighting the successes of the Obama administration.
We climbed out of the god-awful hole this economy was thrown into, been pushed into.
But from there, the Vice President would go on the offensive, saying the recovery had been better.
Imagine where we would be if the Republicans in Congress hadn't played brinksmanship with our national debt.
Narrowing the attack even further, Biden then focused largely on Mitt Romney, accusing him of putting profits before people during his time at Bain and Romney's overall economic message.
Literally, think of anything new he has suggested that deviates from the policies that got us into this hole, except more of the same.
Then the soft-spoken Biden cranked up the volume of his message, criticizing Romney's lack of foreign policy experience and what he called a Republican attack on women's health care.
We will not go back to the 50s in social policy, to the Cold War in our foreign policy, and to the policies of the last administration on our economic policy.
All right, now coming up at 6 o'clock, we'll have more on the Vice President's comments as well as what he had to say about the middle class and the current administration's promise to the middle class. Now, he didn't take any questions from reporters on this trip, but he did stick around for about an hour after his speech, shaking hands and telling New Hampshire voters that in order to finish the work of the first 3 years of this administration, he certainly needs their help moving forward, and the president needs their help moving forward. And he also kind of hinted that he'd be back here soon. We'll have to see about that. Reporting live in Keene, I'm Josh McElveen. Guys, back to you.
Josh, before we let you go, tell us a little bit about the stops and meetings he had before he actually got to Keene.
Yeah, he did make a number of stops. As I said, this was a whirlwind trip. He was actually greeted at the airport in Manchester by Manchester police officer Dan Doherty. You may remember he was a police officer who was shot back in March 5 times during a criminal pursuit. From there, he went over to the Manchester Firehouse, where he joked around with some members of the Manchester Fire Department, saying he's surprised to see them up so early after spending the time fighting that fire last night on Myrtle Street. Obviously, the firefighter's endorsement is something that the administration likely covets as well. And then from there, he actually stopped off in grabbed a bite to eat, ordered a milkshake. We'll show you some of that video coming up at 6 o'clock, but he certainly did make the most of his time and what amounted to be about a 5-hour trip to New Hampshire on this one.